Hey, that's pretty bad. The Raptors facing not the Hornets in this game, the Hawks instead. Yes, they both start with an H, but very different basketball teams and levels of compete or talent or whatever you'd like to describe it as. 114 to 103, the Raptors lose. And the good vibes, the three-game win streak, is now put to rest. And the Raptors back in the L's next to their streak on NBA.com. L1. And a game where the shooting once again failed them. I think they were like 7 for 24, maybe? It was bad, man. What did they shoot from three? Let me check that out. Seven of 29. That is very bad, and especially considering the Hawks were 11 of 27. I know Nick Nurse had mentioned that for the 3-point disparity, he just wants to at least be in the game. I don't think he's expecting to win from the 3-point line very many games, but to be in it. They lost the 3-point battle by 12 points. I think that's in the game, but the Raptors' offense just not good enough outside of that. Pascal struggling immensely. Gary playing 20 minutes in this game, really weird. Fred playing 26 minutes in this game, also just bad, weird. The Raptors opting down the stretch to play big. And the reason for that is that the Raptors could switch more at the point of attack without giving anything up at the back end, yes. But also that when a big guy gets switched, and it's a big guy rotating elsewhere on the floor, and it's a big guy rotating to the ball now, there's just more length on the court. And also with the benefit of one of those guys being like Precious Achua, right? Or Pascal Siakam, who, as far as switching out on guards like DeJounte Murray or Trae Young, are going to be much better than, I guess, what you'd normally expect. But the Raptors in this game, they lost. Bad one. 114-103. This is the Raptors Reaction Podcast. I'm your host, Samson Folk. So the biggest thing in this game, off the start, Scottie Barnes' performance. This was really great from Scottie. I think that this was a nice melding together of a lot of his talents. It's just he's bigger than a guy like Jalen Johnson, right? He's bigger than DeJounte Murray. He's quicker than a couple guys in the front court for the Hawks. He did a great job mixing in off-ball awareness, cuts, being opportunistic to get into spaces where he could get fed the ball and then finish on the inside. Like, I think he only had two shots outside of 3 feet. He really peppered the paint. Had seven attempts. I think seven makes at the rim in this one, and then also on switches, these bully drives where he's agile while also being extremely brutish. It's one of the most unique aspects of his game, getting to positions, those quick pickup points, that fantastic brand of finishing that he has that is returning to the point where people will start saying, "Oh yeah, he's a really great finisher," because it was bad for a large portion of the season so far, but now it's returning to what I consider the norm, which is an elite finisher for his size, for his skill set. And if you want more on Scottie Barnes, go to Raptors Republic YouTube channel. And there's a video from myself and professional scout Josh Codenera, where for 30 minutes we go through Scottie Barnes' film and break down what makes him special and what makes him tick. And also, it is geared a lot towards the role he'd been playing for many games that he didn't really play in this one because of the way that the Hawks defended. But with the change in role back to more of that initiation from him, a little bit more, I guess, cutting from the wing rather than operating as a big or as a DHO hub in this game. He was still plenty fantastic. 9 of 16 from the field, 27 points, 12 rebounds, the 2 assists. I mean, this is the way that the Hawks played him. He had mismatches in this game sometimes. He had possessions where he was clearly the guy who had the best look. Pascal struggled in this game, and Scottie on some possessions is beating guys that Pascal really couldn't. It's a really great game for Scottie. Tough one for Pascal. So not a bunch of assists in this game, and teams were less likely to float over to him. But also the 2 assists is a reflection of that 7 for 29 from the field number. 3 steals as well. Very active game for Scottie. This is kind of the silver lining when you have a young star, a guy who's trying to make his way up the ranks of the NBA, who has not only the resume, but a bunch of the intriguing skills that make it seem plausible that he could. If your team is losing and that star is performing well, it's easier to swallow. And hopefully for people that does make this one a little bit easier. But the fact remains that the Raptors, they had trouble against a good team. And are the Hawks even good? I mean, they certainly have quite a bit of talent on the roster, but they didn't even have Clint Capella, who is absolutely essential to what the Hawks want to do. I know Onyeka Okongwu is a very intriguing player, and I think he's going to end up quite good. And they've definitely been getting stuff out of them. And even in this game, I thought he had several possessions that were really great on Pascal, for example. But the Hawks, they have Trey, they have DeJounte, yes. They have John Collins, who's underwhelmed in a lower usage role, but this is a team the Raptors should be able to compete with, and they looked outclassed for much of this game. I guess we'll kind of zoom in on Pascal. He got gapped a little bit, but for the most part, I think this is a guy who was struggling to beat his defenders in one-on-one, and he got to a lot of spots that were comfortable, and he just didn't hit his shots. And what I mean by that is I think he was 1 or 2 for 11 outside of 3 feet. And he finishes 5 of 16 in this game. And he missed a couple shots from, I think it was like maybe in that 8, 9 foot range that he's typically quite good in. That short mid range it has to be a hub for him. It's one of the unique aspects of his game that allows him to draw so much attention, so many doubles, so much rotation, so that he can play make the way that he sees fit. And those shots didn't go down. The 3 pointers didn't go down. And he wasn't able to force his way to the rim. Even some of his finishes there came in these off ball rolls, right? These cuts. And he finishes with 6 assists in this game, and he's still a major driver of what the Raptors want to do. But in a game where you get basically not even minutes, right? Relative to what you're expecting from Fred and Gary. And Gary goes 2 for 7 and Fred goes 1 for 9. And there's just nothing from your backcourt. And Malachi Flynn to start the game, that first half, I think he had some riveting shot making, 7 points and like one catch and shoot three, but the rest, with this impressive layup, a nice little stop and pop that he made. And the Raptors, though, not getting much from their backcourt and kind of trying to feature attacking through the front court, worked with Scottie, not so much with OG or Pascal, and that made it tough. Precious, Boucher, 14 and 13 off the bench. That was really nice to see, and they were a huge part of the Raptors kind of climbing back into this game, going with that bigger lineup. The defense was awesome. There's only 18 points scored by the Hawks in this game. That's fantastic, and it's kind of what I mentioned earlier, right? Is that the Raptors, if they throw enough size out there against this team, they felt it offensively because they couldn't score late, and this is kind of the trade-off, right? You're putting in these athletic, really good defenders, but also on the other side, these are guys who won't create at the same level as the guards, and that's not saying much. And I mean, they probably did create more than the guards technically in this game because we're looking at Malachi and Gary and Fred, who Malachi was the only player who played above average, and Gary and Fred played way below average. But typically, on an average game, you're losing something as far as offensive skill sets and what you're able to create, making that trade off. And the Raptors made the right trade off in this game. That was the right button to push. It just couldn't bring them all the way back. Down the stretch, they felt it that they were stronger defensively. Even the buckets that the Hawks scored were these really tough shots in the in-between from Trey and from DeJounte Murray. I mean, DeJounte hit 2 in a row on Precious, I believe, and Precious was moving his feet with him while still keeping him at bay and face guarding as well, got the hand in the face for the contest. And DeJounte, some nice rolls on the rim, it fell in, but that's soft touch. That's a shooter, especially from that area of the court. And the Raptors on the other side, they couldn't hit their open shots. They turned down some open ones that they should have taken, and they couldn't score with them down the stretch. They certainly could defend, but they didn't have the juice in this one. And that's really too bad because this was a game where the Raptors, it's not that common for this bench to outplay other benches. Now, some people, I know there's a raging debate about how bad the Raptors bench really is. And if it's just because Nurse refuses to play them, if it's just because Nurse is not being, I guess, is not investing enough time into the bench to see if things will work. And I'm sure that's a fair critique. And when you see games like this where the bench gets more play and it works better, it's very nice to see. You're wondering now, and I'm sure everybody is, when the Raps will find that equilibrium where it's not just the bench having a good game and Gary and Fred play 20 and 26 minutes and combine for 3 for 17 from the field. That's really tough. Maybe 3 for 16. I can't remember. But and Pascal struggles, right? Pascal can't drive forward and be the hub of everything and struggles in his one-on-one and doesn't have the jumper going. And even OG, who has, a couple shots that were made, a little bit of, putting the ball down, but still finishes 5 for 13. It's just the Raptors aren't driving enough offense. Like the field goal percentages, right? In that starting lineup, 38%, 56%. Big shout out Scottie. 31%, 28%, 11%. That's not tenable. You are not going to cut it at the NBA level doing so. And the Raptors, as good that button was to push at the end to bring the bigger guys out, to lean a little bit harder into, crashing the glass, into being able to rotate defensively, it really didn't close the gap because they still needed some of those traditional skills. And they couldn't play like that the whole game, because how could you possibly start like that the whole game? You have to have some belief in Fred, in Gary, to be able to get out there and defend their positions. But in this game, that was not the case. And you worry, right? You worry that this is the Raptors won 3 in a row. Sure. 2 of them versus the Charlotte Hornets, though. And that's why during those reaction pods, I made sure to say, like, hey, this is Charlotte. We don't know anything yet. Not truly. The Raptors have to prove this stuff against other teams, against middle of the pack teams, which Atlanta very much is, against good teams, which we'll see in the coming days, right? Like the last time they played Boston, they said it was a measuring stick game. This time they're gonna play Boston again. I don't know if they consider it a measuring stick game or if they'll be like, damn, this is a team that probably just beats us because Boston is really good this year, and the Raptors, they haven't been. There's nothing. I don't find anything when I go into the numbers for the Raptors that spells elite on any part of the floor. Right? Sure, they cause turnovers. That's fine, but your defense is not one of the better defenses in the league. You still give up a lot of attempts at the rim, and you still allow a very high percentage at the rim, and you still give up a lot of corner threes. It's tough to make the case that they're elite on that end, and being elite at generating turnovers, as we've seen, hasn't translated to a good enough defense. So they're not elite there. They're certainly not elite on offense, and they've had a few nice games in a row, but that also includes Charlotte. There were other promising games too, but the Hawks didn't play the deep dropping sink defense against Scottie that allowed for the DHO hub to kind of allow for everybody to get into the mix and to play freely in the middle of the floor where Scottie can connect and everything like that. They pressured the ball, and that meant that Scottie had more opportunities to just beat guys and score and bully drive, and that was awesome to see. But the Raptors, there was more stagnation in the offense, and I know they probably feel better about the way they pass the ball, but it's hard to keep passing the ball and doing that kind of stuff when you see so many guys miss shots. You shoot 24% from downtown. It starts to feel like a more viable option to take the ball and get to your spot. And the Raptors, credit to them, they did a pretty good job of moving the ball till the bitter end. They just didn't hit shots, and maybe these games start to look a lot better if they do hit shots, but this is a roster. This is a team who says, through cupped hands, we can't shoot. And they don't say it with their voices necessarily, but they say it with their game. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Raptors lose this one, 114 and 103. The Reggie Evans Award. Who would a person give this to? I'd give it to Chris Boucher. Really great cutting in this game. Hit a couple threes. I know that he wasn't able, and he and the bench weren't able to swing this thing all the way back in. And despite being, a guy who closes the game, and despite being a guy who helped the Raptors find the energy to get back in it to some degree, they fall short. And I'm sure he feels the same way. But the hustle in this game was, it was certainly there. I felt like it was a big aspect of this game, and I thought he was awesome. He also got whacked around a couple times in this game. So a warrior for the Reggie Evans Award, Chris Boucher. Okay, top quick reaction comment from my guy, LeeZ. Quote, the outcome was obvious right from the opening bell. Absolutely listless, unfocused, and distracted effort in the very first few minutes. Nick took forever to call a timeout, and then it just got worse from there. Hey, hashtag grumpy old man. I suppose everybody gets blown by, so Fred's effort at POA was okay in your book. Just wondering, and for the love of God, Nick, how about trying Doughton when Fred is crapping the bed on D? End quote. Okay, so yeah, it did take a long time to call that timeout. That's correct. Doughton instead of Fred. I liked the decision that Nick made to go bigger because I don't think that there was a guard that was going to stick DeJounte or Trey. Although I would never turn my nose up at trying Doughton, But I think that Nick found the answer he was looking for defensively. The Raptors found the results they were looking for defensively, and it wasn't because the Hawks stopped, like, had such a big lead that they were disinterested. It was that the Raptors actually, with their bigger lineup and with the talented defenders switching out and rotating, actually found a decent way to stop the Hawks. I thought that was the right one. And Fred, 26 minutes, maybe that's a bit rich for you. Maybe not, but point of attack defense was bad. So bad that he played 26 minutes in a game. When was the last time he did that without being injured? He got pulled. So he didn't go to bat for him in the media afterwards, anyway. But yeah, there's definitely, I understand why people would have a problem with Fred's defensive performance in this one. He also struggled a lot last year versus Trey. It's just, it's not his matchup. Although, I know why people would focus in a little bit more, because there's been more matchups this year that you kind of lean back and say, that's not Fred's matchup, that maybe in the past you would say were. So, LeeZ, thank you for writing in. Good reminder on the timeout. And yeah, time to get grumpy with Nick. Yeah, LeeZ. Everybody, thanks for listening in. If you're on YouTube, like the video, also subscribe. If you like me and my work, the best way to support it and everyone else at Raptors Republic is to go to raptorsrepublic.com and subscribe. The work is awesome. I'm not going to be humble about that. The work is really good. The written work is always great. So please support. For people listening on the podcast, thanks for tuning in. Let me chop it up with you. And yeah, whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day, and goodbye.